Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers, colleagues and friends, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Dr. Sylvie Briand, Director of Global Infectious Hazard Preparedness Department at WHO. I'm pleased to welcome you to the third Global Infodemic Management Conference. You can access interpretation in the 6 UN languages, although we still have some issues with the French translation. I hope it will be sorted out very soon. I'm honored to welcome first Dr. Jouad Majour, Assistant Director General, Emergency Preparedness, World Health Organization. Dr. Majour, you have the floor.
Thank you, Sylvie. Thank you very much. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the final plenary meeting of the third WHO Global Infodemic Management Conference. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a great toll on health system and economies that has impacted each single life on this planet. Countries that have best responded and mitigated the public health and socioeconomic impact have been countries that mounted a whole of government and inclusive whole of society approach, emphasizing unity, equity, and solidarity. This pandemic has given face to another menace that has impacted how people have reacted to and coped with the pandemic and pandemic control measures. I mean the infodemic. The information ecosystem in which we live, interact, and present ourselves influence much of our health choices and actions. The way information rapidly spreads across borders, as well as ways we are connected to each other in local community and networks, determine how we perceive information, share it, use it, give advice to each other, and ultimately how we behave to protect ourselves and promote our health and well-being. Infodemics in digital and offline information environments increasingly challenge achievement of societal goals for prosperous, sustainable, and equitable human development. Mitigating the impact and managing infodemics calls equally for all of society approach. WHO's first infodemic management meeting brought together 1,600 participants in April 2020 to establish a global framework with 50 key actions to tackle this new phenomenon. The second meeting in July 2020 convened 100 experts from 15 scientific disciplines to establish a public health research agenda with a priority list of research questions to direct academic research to find evidence-based intervention and measures to respond to an infodemic. The aim of this third conference is to bring together all parts of society that must co-create a whole of society approach to managing infodemic and determine how each of them experience the problem and can bring solution to establishing an information ecosystem that promote health and well-being. The part of the society that must come together are health authorities, the scientific community, media and journalism community, technology companies, civil society and non-governmental organizations, as well as UN and multilateral agencies. The goal of health supportive information ecosystem must be that individuals and population exercise their right of access to health information and receive information at the right time in the right format from a trusted source, as well as skilled and self-efficacy to make healthy choices to achieve and maintain their health and well-being. I want you to listen today to these societies. Thank you for your attention, and back to you, Sylvie.
Dr. Major, many thanks for this opening address. Now I will introduce a short video, the hero video. Please.
Uncertainty, fear, distrust in public health experts, rejection of effective health measures, violent aggression towards neighbors in our own communities. Whether right next door or across the globe, people are stressed and concerned about the COVID-19 pandemic. Some people we know are skeptical and dismissive about the coronavirus, while others are completely fatalistic. We're bombarded with information from family, friends, social media feeds from distant relatives, breaking news articles, and TV talking heads. We're all just looking for answers about how to navigate the world around us during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we all just want to know how to protect ourselves and our loved ones from infection. But in the process of seeking reliable guidance, we're filtering through so much information. Some of it is true, and some of it is outrageously false. Some of it is a bit outdated. A lot of the time, it's a combination. At WHO, we refer to this as an infodemic. And one thing we've learned from the COVID-19 infodemic is clear. Both innocent circulation of misinformation and malicious disinformation campaigns have triggered people across the globe to take actions that put them at higher risk of spreading coronavirus and make them more vulnerable to harming their health. Infodemics spread rapidly online and offline across borders and influence the way we behave and the health choices we make. And those choices have real-life impact on our own health and well-being, as well as the health and well-being of others, the well-being of our health systems, our economies, and ultimately, the resilience of society. The countries that have best mitigated the public health and socioeconomic impact of the COVID-19 infodemic have been countries that mounted an inclusive, whole-of-society approach, emphasizing unity, equity, and solidarity. So here we are. We're glad you've joined us for WHO's third virtual Global Infodemic Management Conference. In our first two conferences, we brought together stakeholders from 15+ different scientific disciplines to establish a global infodemic management framework, 50 key actions, and a public health research agenda to identify the most effective, evidence-based measures for combating an infodemic. For the past 6 weeks, stakeholders from all sectors of society convened to share lessons learned and to identify concrete problems and solutions that we will, as a whole of society, commit to addressing. We've focused the conference on 6 stakeholder groups that can make immediate impact in addressing infodemics: the science and research community, journalists and media organizations, ministries of health and public health institutions, technology companies and social media platforms, UN agencies and multilaterals, NGOs and civil society groups. The infodemic response is not about a top-down communications approach or a glossy report. It's about building partnerships and evidence-based solutions. It's about delivering the tools and capacity in communities to blunt the impact of misinformation. It's about increasing access to information, supporting journalists to cover the subject with expertise and with safety and professional freedom, improving media and information literacy that can empower individuals and communities to be more resilient and resistant to misinformation. Today is a stake in the ground. It's about youth activists, community leaders, scientists, journalists, policymakers, tech companies, NGOs and health authorities declaring their commitment to manage and mitigate infodemics to support equitable health and well-being for all.
So, after having heard Dr. Major explaining
Après
us
avoir
how
entendu Dr.
important
Mathieu
it
qui
is
nous
our
a
task,
expliqué à quel point c'est important.
sorry, there was some technical issues. So I was saying that after listening to Dr. Major on how what we are doing today is important, I think this video is very well setting the scene for our conversation. And now it's really my honor to introduce the video and for the key opening speech of Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the Director General of the World Health Organization.
Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, living in the age of information is a double-edged sword. While we can access information on health emergencies 24 hours a day, it's vulnerable. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we have witnessed how societies are crippled by this epidemics of too much information. Those infodemics corrode the social cohesion that sustain our societies and the public institutions that support our health and well-being. They're most devastating where inequality is greatest. This is what has brought all of you together today. Through our collective engagement, building on the previous conferences this year, we must develop clear, accessible, evidence-based guidance so that communities will be better equipped to deflect misinformation that wreaks havoc. On behalf of WHO, my sincere thanks for your work. I wish you a productive conference. I thank you.
So today we are also very happy to welcome 3 representatives of countries willing to address the issue of infodemic management. And I would like to welcome first a representative of Latvia, Mr. Viktoras Makarovs, Special Envoy on Information Security from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Latvia. Mr. Makarovs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to thank the WHO for convening this conference. Like many other nations, Latvia is facing its share of disinformation and misinformation around the pandemic. This includes COVID denialism, baseless rumors, conspiracy theories, and harmful health advice. This poses an urgent question: what can societies and governments do to prevent these phenomena from damaging public health and destabilizing societies? I will venture to say that in my country, overall, we have managed to push back on the infodemic with an informed, reasonable, and fact-based public discussion around COVID-19. Here are the 3 main strengths that we have been relying on. First, the Latvian media have been playing a critical role. They serve as a trusted source of information and as a platform for open public debate. Investigative journalists have exposed and debunked falsehoods, conspiracy theories, and misconceptions about COVID-19, while also holding the government to account. As independent media are under severe economic constraints, the government channeled substantial relief funding through the Independent Media Support Fund. Second, the government has strived to conduct well-coordinated, extensive, and straightforward communication. Trusted figures, public health experts, doctors are in the driver's seat. And it's not just the government. Doctors at a leading hospital just launched their own online campaign to debunk dangerous COVID myths. But to be frank, this has been very much about learning on the go. Lastly, the critical mindset and awareness of disinformation in our society has helped. Now, this is our cue to do more to advance media and information literacy systematically over the long term. On a related note, the pandemic has exposed the need for more accountability and transparency on the part of the online platforms. Too often they are a convenient tool for spread of falsehoods and manipulation. They need to get better at addressing this issue without undermining freedom of expression online. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations has a unique role to play in addressing the infodemic as part of a multilateral response to the consequences of COVID-19. This is why we supported the UN Secretary General's initiative, Verified, and the Communications Response Initiative. In June, Latvia initiated the cross-regional statement on infodemic in the context of COVID-19. It was supported by 130 UN member states from all regions of the world. As a follow-up to this statement, Latvia, together with Australia, France, India, and Indonesia, organized a side event on this topic on the eve of the United Nations General Assembly special session on COVID-19. It was opened by the President of the General Assembly, and we were very glad to have Dr. Sylvie Briand as a WHO speaker. So thank you, Madam Chair. We commend the WHO for its leadership in delivering the correct science-based information about the pandemic and related issues. In the nearest future, a strong global push for effective communication on vaccines and immunization is going to be a priority, and we'll look forward to supporting the WHO and other UN institutions' efforts in this regard. Looking further ahead, COVID-19 is not going to be the last global health emergency. We must not only improve specific crisis management mechanisms, but we should also address the pre-existing conditions in our societies exposed by the crisis that might aggravate the impact of misinformation and disinformation. Promoting media freedom and strengthening media and information literacy should be at the center of this effort. This is why I would like to conclude by encouraging the WHO, UNESCO, and other actors of the UN system, when the time is ripe, to establish a process for analyzing the lessons learned from the current infodemic to help us all be better prepared in the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Many thanks, Mr. Makarov, for these very nice words and for your support for multilateral approach for infodemic management that indeed affects all countries in the world. And so we are very happy to count on your support for further activities. Now, let me introduce Mr. Alex Aiken, Executive Director for the Government Communications, Prime Minister's Office and Cabinet Office Communication of the United Kingdom. Mr.
Dr. Briand, Dr. Briand, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to speak at the WHO and to contribute in a sense of humility and I hope opportunity to this really important debate, and to follow Victor's, our colleague from Latvia, where I've been to and talked to the Latvian government about the importance of tackling disinformation on a society-wide level. But today, I want to talk and build on the history of collaboration that the World Health Organization and the United Kingdom government have, and make an offer to all the countries and governments involved about how we can collectively and effectively tackle disinformation. First, as the WHO has pointed out, we do face an infodemic, and that challenge poses a serious challenge to vaccine confidence, and more widely, a challenge to confidence in government. As the Lancet has demonstrated in a survey of 149 countries, vaccine confidence is dropping across the world. And the failure to address this compromises our response to the pandemic, and in addition, global and indeed local health outcomes. So the responsibility of a response is shared. I was struck by a recent survey from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, who said that after people have been shown misinformation on vaccines, citizens who said they would definitely accept a COVID vaccine fell by over 6%, and this brought the rate below the level needed for population level immunity. So we know that disinformation and misinformation has an effect, and if we are to tackle that, we have to do this together. I have spent the last 8 months, like everyone on at this conference, trying to contribute to the global fight against this dreadful virus. And communications has proved in the United Kingdom and indeed in other countries to be a powerful lever for public good, to shape public behaviours. In the UK, the Hands, Face, Space campaign to encourage the public to adopt the right behaviours has been central to our work. We've also, in the cross-government effort, had a strong team working to counter disinformation on 5G conspiracies and other areas. So we've developed a certain expertise in this area. And we've shared that. We're working with the UN and the World Health Organization and the universities. We have developed the Go Viral online game, which is aimed at younger people, and it teaches them about the dangers of misinformation and how they can combat it. We've mobilised our rapid response unit in the UK, which every week deals with up to 70 issues of misinformation and works with the social media companies and civil society to tackle disinformation. But as we now approach the rollout of vaccines, we have to recognise that the pandemic and the infodemic doesn't respect borders, which is why we are supporting a global response and that collaboration across the whole of society. And we expect to make this a central part of our agenda as the United Kingdom chairs the G7 in 2021. Everyone has to work together on this, public, private and civil society, and we'll draw on the excellent and innovative work undertaken by the WHO. We believe that the framework for tackling the infodemic has 3 pillars: principles, partnering and platforms. In terms of principles, we need to work with partners to develop a best practice approach that will prove effective at a global level. We know that fundamentally what works is telling powerful stories through trusted intermediaries, particularly those from this community, from the scientific and medical and public health professions. This trusted coalition, in partnership with government, can meaningfully impact public health outcomes and reassure people, give them the confidence in the vaccines that the world scientists are developing. And we believe that using that as a starting point, we can build a holistic and evidence-based approach to the pandemic. Central to this work is the project the United Kingdom is leading through the OECD, which involves around 50 countries from around the world, to develop a framework for public service communications. And at the heart of that is attempting to break down boundaries between public health communicators and central government communicators to get people to work together. And there could be no more important task than working together on tackling the pandemic. And I think I would also make the point that communication, in my view, is science, not sport or art. And to effectively tackle the pandemic, as we have found in the UK, you need press officers and marketing people, but you also need data scientists, behavioural experts, and counter-disinformation specialists. Turning to partnering, as Dr. Tendros has been quoted as saying, we are not just fighting an epidemic, we are fighting an infodemic. And fake news spreads faster and more easily, I would argue, than the virus and is just as dangerous. Partnering means encouraging people to build on best practice. In the UK, we have utilised universities. I've talked about the Go Viral campaign, and we also have our Resist framework for tackling disinformation, which is available publicly on the UK government's website, gov.uk, and I would encourage colleagues to use and build and indeed improve upon that. So with partners, we can deliver a global campaign and global impact. And we'll work, of course, with the WHO, but also with anyone who wants to come together and join that coalition, as we heard from Victor earlier on in this session. And we will convene a global vaccine confidence summit, which will be a collaborative effort and focus global attention on the issues. Finally, on platforms, we need the necessary communications infrastructure that will enable this whole of society, this global effort to come together. There is an urgent need to do this, and together with the WHO and technology partners, we are looking to build a groundbreaking platform that can address these challenges, that will underpin the communications effort. Throughout the world, we've endured the same challenges over the pandemic, and we have drawn on the inspiration and the knowledge of countries as diverse as Germany, New Zealand, and Singapore, and Japan, and Korea. And we'll take those lessons into our presidency of the G7 next year. But we need now to take action to address the immediate threat. So in closing, I would say that alongside our global partners, the UK is using its leadership position as G7 president to tackle the threat of the infodemic head on. We're ambitious in our goals, but we think this is necessary for the challenge we face, and this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. If we don't get this right, it has the potential to have long-term and a detrimental effect on public health. It will undermine confidence in future vaccines. It will damage public health initiatives and trust in government and indeed non-governmental institutions. There is no room for a plan B. We passionately believe that with concerted global leadership, where the UK will play its part, and through the WHO and our partners in academia and the social media companies and the private sector, we will win the fight against the infodemic. Thank you very much for this opportunity to contribute to your discussions.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Eichen, for those very wise words. Indeed, you're right. We need always to remember that building trust is absolutely crucial for an effective response to an epidemic or a pandemic. And everything that fuels distrust will undermine this response. And this is also no other way than working together in partnership to build this trust. And that's why we are very happy to learn about the experience of UK and also your plan for the future. That will be, of course, very important to factor in the discussion of today and for future discussions around infodemic management. So thank you again. I will now give the floor to Dr. Abache Ranaou from Niger. Dr. Rabaché is the Secretary General of the Ministry of Public Health Niger. Dr. Ranaou, vous avez la parole. Merci.
Bon. Vous m'entendez, madame? Vous m'entendez, madame?
Oui, nous vous entendons.
D'accord. Donc, je disais, excusez-moi, je vais le faire donc en français.
Oui, bien sûr.
Je peux afficher ma présentation ou bien ce n'est pas nécessaire? Je peux partager l'écran avec vous?
Oui, vous pouvez partager votre écran.
D'accord. Donnez-moi juste une seconde. Parce que la présentation, voilà, c'est ça. Donc, je voudrais repasser la présentation que nous avions faite l'autre jour, le 3 décembre, dans le cadre donc, de la gestion de l'infodémie, dans ce contexte de la COVID. Je voudrais donc rappeler les dispositions qui ont été prises dans le cadre de cette gestion-là, à travers la mise en place d'un comité multisectoriel au sein duquel nous avions une commission en charge de la communication sur les risques et engagements communautaires. Également, dans ce contexte-là, tout cela s'inscrivait dans le plan national global de riposte contre la pandémie. Nous avions développé plusieurs outils d'action de sensibilisation menés avec les communautaires, avec les leaders religieux, avec les traditionnels, les groupes formels et informels des femmes et des jeunes, ainsi que les relais communautaires. Nous avons également utilisé la technologie de l'information, les nouvelles technologies de l'information et de la communication pour la diffusion de la bonne information. Là, nous avions un numéro que nous utilisons, un numéro que nous appelons numéro 701 et qui se passait donc en 9 langues. Donc, dès que vous composez ce numéro-là, toute l'information dans toutes les langues là, si vous parlez une des 9 langues, tout de suite, vous avez accès à l'information. Ensuite, je voudrais peut-être dire comment est-ce que nous sommes arrivés à cette gestion de l'infodémie au Niger. Nous avons, compte tenu effectivement du flux de l'information, du flux important, j'allais dire, de l'information, nous avons donc recruté un social media monitor dont le travail consistait effectivement à faire une analyse, une évaluation de l'information à travers une collecte de l'information. Donc, on collecte de l'information à travers les journaux, à travers tous les autres médias, les WhatsApp, les Facebook, etc. Donc, son travail, c'est de collecter toutes les informations et maintenant de procéder à une analyse. Quand vous regardez en bas, nous avons un outil de traitement des rumeurs et de prise de décision. Donc, ce moniteur-là, il collecte toutes les informations et il procède à travers l'utilisation de cet outil de traitement des rumeurs. Il fait une analyse, une évaluation de l'information pour effectivement dégager la vraie information. Donc, on tire la conclusion par rapport aux informations croisées, les informations collectées, pour donner, effectivement, apporter une réponse à des rumeurs s'il y a des rumeurs. Donc, on fait en sorte que, au lieu d'attaquer la rumeur, non, on analyse la situation et on apporte la vraie information. Et cette information-là, elle doit en ce moment être relayée par plusieurs canaux. L'un des canaux, c'est d'abord l'autorité elle-même, ou trouver quelqu'un, un pot focal, ou une personne qui a de l'aura, qui doit passer l'information, sachant bien que cette personne-là, chaque fois, qui doit parler au nom du gouvernement, qui doit parler au nom du ministère de la Santé publique. Et elle va passer cette information, cette bonne information, et les autres canaux maintenant vont être utilisés, notamment les décideurs digitaux ou les influenceurs digitaux. Qui sont ces influenceurs digitaux? Ce sont ceux-là qui sont sur tous les médias, mais qui, quand ils donnent une information, on sait que c'est la bonne information. Et ils sont écoutés. Donc,
voilà, elle n'est pas capable de me trouver. Voilà, ok, c'est bon, j'y suis. Je me suis nommée. Oh putain, merde.
Donc, on fait passer l'information à travers ces influenceurs digitaux. Et également, il y en a d'autres canaux. Ce sont toutes les radios communautaires, les radios privées et les autres. Et tous les journalistes qui ont été formés dans ce sens-là. Donc, il y a déjà une formation préalable qu'on a donnée pour aider effectivement à la transmission de la bonne information. On ne doit pas attaquer la mauvaise information, mais on doit plutôt apporter une information vraie qui va éclairer les populations dans la gestion de l'eau. Et qu'est-ce que nous pouvons retirer ou nous pouvons retenir comme leçon apprise? C'est qu'effectivement, le fait qu'on ait mis en place ce moniteur qui nous filtre l'information et qui nous permet d'évaluer le flux d'information et de tirer la bonne information, l'utilisation de ces influenceurs digitaux est un excellent moyen. Donc, qui permet vraiment non seulement de collecter l'information et de la diffuser sur plusieurs médias. Ensuite, il y a aussi un système de distribution de l'information, de diffusion de l'information de proximité. Ce sont tous ces groupements, des gens, des femmes, des leaders religieux, des leaders d'opinion qu'on utilise, qui sont formés, des scouts, des jeunes qui sont formés et qui renforcent la communication de masse. Donc, ce que déjà les médias donnent, on passe maintenant par l'utilisation de ces médias de proximité, par ces influenceurs de proximité, pour davantage diffuser l'information et la bonne information. Ensuite, nous avons également constaté que le fait qu'au sein même de ces commissions, nous avons aussi certaines corporations comme les forces de défense et de sécurité, ça nous a permis d'avoir aussi un accès facile au camp des militaires et au camp des forces de sécurité, ce qui a permis d'atteindre une importante cible en matière donc, de l'information par rapport à leur vécu, par rapport à la situation qu'ils vivent dans ces camps de concentration. Voilà un peu ce qu'on peut retenir comme leçon apprise de cette gestion de la pandémie. Je peux peut-être dire en conclusion que avoir quelqu'un qui répond au nom du gouvernement ou au nom du ministère, c'est très important. Ça veut dire avoir une seule voie de communication, avoir quelqu'un aussi, une personne qui a de l'aura, qui est écoutée, et également maintenant les autres moyens. Donc, avoir ces influenceurs, bien les identifier. On sait qu'ils sont influençants dans ces dispositifs-là, dans ces réseaux. Il faut bien les localiser, il faut bien les utiliser et les encadrer, les accompagner. Et enfin, il faut renforcer les capacités de tous ces autres moyens, canaux de communication. Au-delà donc des médias publics, privés, il faut passer maintenant par les canaux ou j'allais dire les porteurs de voix de proximité, donc qui sont les autorités locales, qui sont les radios locales, qui sont les jeunes, les scouts, comme je l'ai dit tantôt, et le groupement des femmes. Voilà donc en résumé ce que je peux dire sur la gestion de l'infodémie, ce que nous avons utilisé au Niger en matière donc, de réponse. Et vraiment, ça nous a permis d'apporter un changement d'attitude, de comportement, même si on continue encore à avoir des résistances. Et c'est normal, il y a encore des résistances. Et nous sommes en train de renforcer cette stratégie pour nous permettre de mieux diffuser l'information et la bonne information. Je vous remercie.
Many thanks, Dr. Ranau. Really, it was great to hear your lessons learned for this first part of the pandemic and how much you have been putting in place to try to manage infodemic better. We fully agree with you that it's extremely important to engage communities, and you have done so with religious leaders, women and youth in your countries. Also very important to use new technologies at their best. And it's great to see that you have been able to translate key messages in 9 languages. Also, very importantly, you have put in place a full system to monitor the information and mis and disinformation as well. And this monitoring is indeed extremely important. And finally, I learned that you also used amplifiers of trusted information to make sure that the information is disseminated to all the communities in your country. So these lessons learned are really important, and I hope that during this conference we will share many more. But what you have seen today is that really a lot is happening in every country in the world, and what is very key now is to increase our collaboration to make sure that we are all moving in the same direction. So after having listening to UK, Latvia, and Niger, now it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Mark Ryan, who is the Executive Director of the Emergency Program at WHO. Mike, you have the floor.
Thank you, Sylvie. And thank you to everyone here at WHO and all the partners who've been doing such amazing work in this space for, now it seems like forever, but the last year. And it is of note as we come to the end of the first calendar year of our awareness of this, to see how our global landscape, how science, and how ordinary lives have been changed and affected, sometimes positively, but very often for those people who are victims of this disease and its consequences. Some terrible outcomes and some terrible tragedies that we've witnessed. I'm really, really impressed with the work of the 6 society tracks in the course of the last 6 weeks. I was trying to think of new names Sylvie and Tim and Mindy and others are great at coming up with new names, infodemics. But this is, I was wondering, was this a discussathon or was it a talkathon or is it a consultathon over the last 6 weeks? But you must all be exhausted. But what I do sense in this is a massive, massive energy. 200 organizations, hundreds of panelists, more than 5,000 people attending these dialogues. This, in some sense, underpins and just clearly demonstrates the energy, the enthusiasm, the desire, but also the sense of purpose and sense of concern in this space. We, collectively, as a society, will get the management of information during epidemics right, and we will get it wrong. If we get it right, people will make good decisions, and those decisions may save their lives or somebody else's life. If we get it wrong, they will make bad decisions, and people will suffer because of that. So this is as important as PPE. This is as important as therapeutics. This is as important as a shot in the arm, because it gives people the tools to be able to manage the new world as we see it and as we face it. And the new world has both massive opportunities when it comes to information and the fourth industrial revolution and the Internet of Things, but it also is a daunting and sometimes scary place to be as infodemics wash over us and we don't know which pieces of information to pull from that tsunami and that forceful tsunami that sweeps us off our feet at times. This has been a truly whole of society engagement. And, you know, in a sense, what we've heard, I think, over the last few weeks, that we're all part of the problem and we're all part of the solution. It's not that we are the solution to somebody else's problem. We're all contributing information into this space, one level or another. And we have responsibilities in how we do that. And then we have responsibilities on how we give people tools to use that information and how we align the information between entities and organizations and deliver that in a collective, more cohesive, more integrated fashion as best we can. And as I said, we have these solutions at hand. I think the previous work that's been done in the previous two Infodemics meetings as well, and the roadmap for research, and a lot of the issues have been laid out. And I think a lot of the talking has been done, and some of the solutions are emerging. And this process is already generating real, meaningful solutions. But, you know, we have to walk the talk now, and we have to start converting our commitment into practices and into outcomes that are meaningful for people, for their lives. We must commit to do our part. WHO is committing to do its part, but we are just part of that solution. I've said it since the first days of Gorn. No one institution has all the capacity to fight epidemics. That will remain. That was true 20 years ago. That was true 10 years ago, and it is even more true today. The collaboration needed across the public, the private, the non-governmental, the community, civil society, to work on this is massive. But as I said, we must commit, and we as WHO do commit to do our part. And that's why we are here partly today, and hopefully today, to issue a call that actually says that we need a global movement. Something that moves us forward to promote access to health information and to mitigate harm from health misinformation, and both among online and offline communities. And as such, that is a manifesto. It's not a political manifesto. It is a call to action. It is a manifesto for the political commitment we need, the organizational commitment we need, the societal commitment we need to solve this problem. I'm going to hand over to Tim Nguyen, who's one of the midwives to this process, to maybe read to you the core of the manifesto. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Mike, for your kind introduction. We had our rapporteur listening in to the discussions over the last 6 weeks and try to distill the very good points all the tracks and society made, and we distilled this into a call of action. I will later explain a little bit how we're going to propose it to you. What I'm going to do now is to read out a summary text of what we heard from this discussion. We'll start with an introduction and then come to the concrete 7 actions we are asking all of us to commit to. Since the beginning of the outbreak over a year ago, the COVID-19 pandemic has gravely affected our societies and economies. Likewise, it has deeply disrupted the lives of billions of people across the globe, including the way we consume, produce, and react to information. Thanks to new technologies, we have been able to widely disseminate knowledge and evidence on this new disease. However, social media platforms have also been the carriers of falsehood and distortions. Underlining that the world is facing a rapid amplification and circulation of accurate but also false information, the UN Secretary General and the Director General of the World Health Organization both declared that we are currently fighting an infodemic in the same way we are fighting a pandemic. An infodemic is defined as a tsunami of information, some accurate, some not, that spreads alongside an epidemic. If it's not managed accordingly, an infodemic can have direct negative impacts on the health and populations and the public health response by undermining the trust in science and interventions. We are also seeing that infodemics hinder the cohesiveness of societies by increasing existing inequities, stigma, gender disparity, and generation rift. Although infodemics are not a new phenomenon, the volume and the rapid scale-up of facts, but also misinformation and disinformation surrounding the COVID-19 outbreak are unprecedented. Owing to the opportunities and challenges brought by new technologies and social media platforms, the infodemic that accompanies the first pandemic of the digital age is more visible and challenging than ever before. Practicing information hygiene, just as we are practicing hand and cough hygiene, is thus becoming vital to prevent the spread of the virus. This overflow of information knows no boundaries and affects our physical as well as our digital spaces. By acting together to improve infodemic management online and offline and advocating for continued solidarity, we believe that we can help our communities and those most vulnerable adopt healthy behaviors. As outlined in the resolution on COVID-19 adopted by the consensus at the 73rd World Health Assembly and the G20 Health Ministers Declaration of the Riot Summit, we need to provide populations with reliable and comprehensive information on COVID-19 and take measures to counter misinformation and disinformation. The response to this infodemic demands the support, development, and application of efficient solutions that equip individuals and their communities with the knowledge and tools to promote accurate health information and mitigate the harm that misinformation and disinformation causes. Fully aware of the limits of top-down approaches, we call upon the implementation of interventions that engage with, listen to, inform, and empower people so they can make decisions to protect themselves and others. Deeply concerned with the undermining consequences of the current infodemic due to COVID-19 response and acknowledging the great potential for improved risk communication through new tools, we hereby call on key stakeholders and the global community to commit to undertaking the following actions. First, recognize that an infodemic is a tsunami of information, some accurate, some not, that spreads alongside an epidemic, and note that it cannot be eliminated, but it can be managed. Second, acknowledge that infodemic management can reduce the direct and indirect negative impacts on the health of populations, as well as growing mistrust towards governments, science, and health personnel, which has fueled the polarization of societies. Third, emphasize that everyone has a role to play in addressing the infodemic. Fourth, support a whole of society approach and engage with communities in the production, verification, and dissemination of information that leads to healthy behaviors during epidemics and pandemics. Fifth, commit to finding solutions and tools consistent with the freedom of expression to manage the infodemic, embedding the use of digital technologies and data science. 6, strive to make science more accessible, transparent, and understandable, maintain trusted sources of information, and promote evidence-informed policies, thereby fostering people's trust in them. Seventh, learn from the COVID-19 infodemic management practices and share experience on value-added partnerships. We encourage other organizations and individuals to join us in the World Health Organization in making these commitments and holding ourselves accountable to them by signing this statement of commitment. What we would like to invite you is we will share a link to our website, posting again this call for action. And we have a registration form for you to sign if you're in agreement and join us in this call for action. We will launch it today and have it open until the 14th of February. So we can then formally see how many of you joined us by the 15th of February. We picked this date because the 15th February marks the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary, when the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros, declared that we are also fighting an infodemic alongside this epidemic. So we hope that in the next 2 months, we can collect and rattle you against this call for action. Thank you very much. Back to Silly or Mike.
Thanks, Tim. It was fantastic. And yeah, if we could all live up to the commitments in that manifesto, we would make huge progress together. It's wonderful to see this movement and manifesto or not, the fact so many have come together to share ideas and come up with common solutions. That's, for me, half the battle, more than half the battle. But coming together and formally recognizing a statement also allows us to leverage the kind of political support and the investment that we're going to need to make this science truly effective and to drive this process forward, especially in empowering people all over the world, not just in countries with resources, but be able to drive this process throughout the world and participation by all, innovation by all. And I think one thing that's great about information management and great about communications and community engagement, this is the one area I think where the world is the flattest, and I don't mean flat earth, but where the differentials in knowledge and contribution are actually remarkably sometimes in the other direction than what people expect. I have learned more about effective communication, about community engagement, and about trust from my colleagues in Africa and the Middle East and the Far East. And in fact, in this particular pandemic, the developing world has offered solutions south to north, especially in this area. And maybe the north should have been listening a little bit more intently, as under-resourced health systems in the south contained epidemics by leveraging community engagement, by leveraging knowledge, and by leveraging the management of good information. So for that, we thank those who have led the way in all parts of the world. And again, it's wonderful to see this taking shape. And Tedros, as you know, often says science, solidarity, and solutions. So with infodemiology, thank you, Sylvie, and all, we're getting the science. With your engagement, we have the solidarity. With this manifesto and with your broad engagement in the future, together, we will find and deliver the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike and Tim, for those words. And just to highlight that Mike said that there was a lot of energy here in this room and in this team and online. But I have to thank him also for his energy because he has been giving so much to the communication since the beginning of this pandemic with many pressers every week. And his energy has been also so inspiring for all of us. So just to tell you that here we are very committed to this cause of managing better infodemic because we see the risk, but also we see the fantastic opportunities that we have to work together and make it happen. And so with this, I will highlight that we will have a second part of this conference where we will discuss what has happened in the past 6 weeks with 20 webinars where we hosted 290 panelists and experts from over 200 different organizations. And there was more than 5,600 people attending those webinars and discussing the solution. So we will first have a short break of 10 minutes away from computers. and then we will reconvene and listen to the chair of each of the 6 streams, who will tell us what have been the solution they have found. And we will listen from the stream discussing on countries and health authorities solution, civil society solutions, media and journalism solution, tech sectors, and UN and multilateral agencies, and the science solutions as well. So let's have this short break, and then let's meet again in 10 minutes to discuss those very exciting proposals from the 6 streams. Thank you very much.
Restez chez vous, oh, oh, ce n'est pas tuant. C'est sorti qu'on veut tous là qui peut nous tuer. Le Covid n'a pas d'amis, il a débuté en Chine. Il détruit déjà le monde, des dizaines de milliers de morts. Quand on nous demande de prendre des mesures, c'est pour nos vies. Si nous ne faisons rien, si nous ne faisons rien, on court un risque, un très grand risque. Évitez le Covid, éternions tous sur nos coudes. Salions-nous avec les coudes et portons vite tous un masque. Évitons les groupes de masse, gardons tous nos distances. Lavons-nous toujours les mains et comme ça, ça va aller. Corona, Corona, ennemi commun. Corona, Corona, ennemi commun. Ensemble au combat, tu ne passeras pas par nous. Nous allons te barrer la route avec nos mesures barrières. Appelez le 1510 en cas d'urgence. C'est le numéro vert et il est gratuit. On enterre déjà les gens dans des fosses communes. Et Seigneur, prends pitié. Se protéger, c'est protéger les autres, mes amis. Restons soudés face à cette pandémie. Ensemble, allons tous au combat. Surtout ne baissons pas les bras. Ne laissons pas le gouvernement se battre seul. Car une seule main ne peut pas tout faire. Parlons-en autour de nous, car les images parlent d'elles-mêmes. Elles emportent tout ce qu'on aime. Parlons-en autour de nous. Corona, Corona, ennemi commun. Corona, Corona, ennemi commun. Ensemble au combat, tu ne passeras pas par nous. Nous allons te barrer la route avec nos mesures barrières.
My brother, my sister, papa, mama, and pikin. Corona, no big pass us. We go fight time, we go win. As long as we remember to always do the right thing. Wash your hands, love each other, we go win. Oh. Corona, na the virus, we dey worry human being. E no get Lego, but e dey waka from person to person. But we fit beat am, we fit stop am if we maintain good hygiene and practice social distancing. We go win. Oh. No shaking hands with your neighbor. Blow them a kiss from afar. Use soap and water to wage war. Let's show this thing who we are. We are special, we're courageous, we are awesome human beings. We dey super, we get power, we can conquer anything. If we hear word and obey laws and exercise discipline. Wash your hands, love each other, we go win. Oh. If it be like say you know well, like it's something they do you, and you feel say, you believe say, you get a seed it do you, and your body no grisogy, like it's something they do you. No let panic finish you, you go win. Oh. Self-isolate for the sake of all the people that you love. Oh, don't go around spreading rumors.
Welcome back to this third global conference on infodemic management. So this part of the conference will be dedicated to hear from the 6 tracks. We will hear the track on country and health authorities, the track on civil society solutions, track on media and journalism, the track on technology sector, a track on UN and multilateral agencies, and the track on science solutions. So each track will be preceded by a video, and then we will give the floor to the speaker representing this track. So let's start with the health track.
Across the world, health ministries aren't just responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, but also to the infodemic alongside it. Going forward, infodemic management must be part of the comprehensive emergency response if we expect people to adopt effective health interventions and health behaviors. 2020 has taught us that we need to listen to constituents more and build relationships and trust amongst the populations we serve. As country health authorities, our goal is to roll out infodemic management best practices to improve country resilience to misinformation.
Thanks a lot. So now we are giving the floor to Neville Kalecha, who is a director from the Directorate for Health Information and Research from the Ministry of Health in Malta. Neville, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Brian. Thanks, and it's a big pleasure, obviously, and the big responsibility to having been assigned this job. But I will try to reflect as much as possible, as accurately as possible, the reflections of the health track. I have a few slides, if I'm allowed to share them. Yes, so I've split my presentation into 3. Basically, first, the challenges that countries felt that they had to face during this pandemic, especially related to the infodemic. So we were basically faced with a novel challenge, with a complete vacuum of knowledge. The same vacuum of knowledge paralyzed our responses. Countries were crying for advice also from international agencies that obviously were equally paralyzed because this was a new challenge which required to get evidence to be gathered before any advice could have been formulated. Needless to say, being a new challenge, it meant that new evidence was being produced at a record speed all the time, and advice had to reflect that new evidence. This was sometimes, obviously, not sometimes, but a lot of the time, attacked by misinformers, conspiracy theorists, as showing weakness rather than responsiveness. Added to this was, in a way, part of the response, which also presented a challenge. So most research venues, most research channels were actually fast-tracking publications pre-peer review. And we've seen also some not so good research making it quickly into the public domain in the hands of people who were not trained in scientific discourse, in critical appraisal, or in systematic appraisal of research. If I can point fingers towards ourselves, as in the countries, we've also seen several of our governments expressing dissent between different parts of government in the public domain. And many of us believe that this was highly correlated, so to say, with the grip that the infodemic had on specific populations. And a final challenge, I'm sure there's many more, but I'm trying to stick to the main ones, was basically the incredible reach of social media across borders, and how social media was spreading misinformation, which was then spilling over very easily into other conventional media, into news outlets, radio, TV, even the mouths, so to say, of influential people within our countries. In terms of response, we had an interesting summary of presentations within our track, and I've selected these 5 particularly. So Canada presented the setup within Immunize Canada, and we can see a clear example here of early acknowledgement of the threat of misinformation. And by early, I mean 25 years ago, actually. So hats off here to Canada for acknowledging the contribution of misinformation to the control, or the lack thereof, of epidemics. We saw an example from Finland how indeed infodemic management and engagement does not necessarily need to cost millions, but there's a lot that can be done within existing capacity. We had a brief also from New Zealand, and I think one striking feature there was how even briefing the Prime Minister herself involved actually an overview of infodemic trends. And I think we all acknowledge the success shown by New Zealand in the control of the epidemic. So I leave it up to people to conclude whether they could have been correlated or not. We had Niger presenting before, and he also explained how this cycle of evaluation and resultant action has been instituted in Niger. And finally, we had the Philippines showing us how they are trying to saturate, and that's the word they've used. I've tried to quote it as best as I could, saturating media with the right messages. I think you all understand how the combination of human nature to share the bizarre and also algorithms within social media tend to saturate media with the wrong messages. So this is clearly one of the tasks that's in front of us as infodemic managers. And needless to say, I have to highlight, Tim has presented earlier on the WHO response. I am lucky enough to have been involved by WHO earlier on in this journey, a very short journey, as Dr. Ryan has explained earlier. We only started in summer on this, and since then we have a fully fledged strategy. Training has been completed. A 4-week intensive training course has been completed for just under 300 infodemic managers coming from across the globe. And I'm happy to note, as a country representative, as a member state representative, that infodemic management is something that is becoming more and more mainstreamed. And listening to, for example, the Council of Prime Ministers within the EU, speaking about how the infodemic is threatening the response to the pandemic, is definitely one major sign of success here. Finally, what next? I think most of the representatives felt that we need to have more acknowledgement of infodemic management actually as an important non-pharmaceutical intervention. All right, just like any other public health measures that we have instituted in the country, I would possibly push it that this would be the mother of non-pharmaceutical interventions, because without it, other non-pharmaceutical interventions might fail because of non-compliance. There was a clear appeal to listen to constituents. We need to listen to the people out there. We need to contextualize our messages. That's the only way to build relationships and trust. We can work with existing systems and health systems. Everybody can do something, as I explained earlier, and I think our Finnish example earlier on was very encouraging. And we definitely need to start looking towards the future to build resilience for future emergencies, to tackle misinformation, and proactively rather than reactively. One very, very strong message that came out from all the speakers in the health track was the need to evaluate comprehensively and rapidly. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be 100% rigorous, but we need the good feel of what's happening out there in order to be able to respond rapidly and in time. And allow me to conclude that misinformation is not about censoring messages out there, but rather about sharing the right information. The chaff spreads itself naturally. Unfortunately, we need to engage in spreading the wheat. And that's all that we had to present from the health track.
Many thanks, Neville, and it's really great to see that many countries have already put in place a number of interventions, that those solutions are contextualized, but at the same time, they can be used in other settings. So there is a value in sharing our experience, of course. You highlighted that everyone can do something about it, and I think we all agree, and all those who are listening to this conference agree about it. And also we understand that we are fighting now this current COVID-19 pandemic, but there will be other pandemics, other epidemics, and what we need now to do is also build resilience so that next time we are more equipped to manage infodemic in a better way. And finally, you said that something very important about evaluating what we do. And it's true that we have started to do things a little bit ad hoc, I would say, but it's really time now to put in place some strong evaluation system, even if we start small, because it's what is important is to start, and then we can, of course, expand and develop more sophisticated framework as we go. And finally, I think your point of not censoring, I think it's very important, because it's true that during this pandemic, we have listened to many different voices and sometimes dissent opinions. And the tendency has been in some places to suppress those dissent voices. But we know that it's not the right way forward, and it's better to collectively try to build up the good information that will help us also to build trust in the population. So thanks a lot for this wise word. And now I would like to introduce the civil society and non-governmental organization track. And first we start with the video.
Though our day-to-day may be different during a pandemic, we don't stop sharing our world with our neighbors, friends, and family, our brothers and sisters in worship, and our local institutions that support our communities. But misinformation is threatening the strength and sustainability of our communities. As civil society leaders, we are committed to infodemic management that's driven by and for communities. Infodemic solutions don't need to be high-tech. People just need the right tools to tackle it locally in real life and online. Our goal is for civil society to provide necessary support to communities to manage infodemics.
Many thanks. And so now I would like to introduce two speakers. The first speaker will be Praveen Gomez, who is the head of program and strategy in the Alliance Development Trust, who will talk about this engagement of civil society. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Civil society is not a homogeneous and does not encompass a singular view. However, we as civil society representatives and advocates come together around a shared interest and purpose to advocate for a community-led approach to halt the spread of the COVID-19 infodemic. Though we are a diverse group, we share similar challenges when it comes to infodemic management within our respective communities. Today, I will present three challenges which we believe must be addressed in order to manage the COVID-19 infodemic and mitigate its re-emergence in future pandemics. One, a lack of timely, accessible, credible, verifiable, and contextualized information in a variety of languages and formats from local, regional, global actors make it difficult for factual information to reach intended audiences and creates opportunities for disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation to thrive. Two, mistrust in government and global health agency is pervasive and proliferating due to uncoordinated and at times misleading or even false information. Three, low health, digital media and information literacy and capacities make it difficult to access and reach our intended audience. Technical and inaccessible language makes it difficult for broad audiences to understand the information that is being shared with them. These challenges affect us all. People around the globe are eager to halt the spread of COVID-19. There are many, however, that are uncertain, concerned, afraid, and mistrustful. They want to end the pandemic, but may struggle to find actionable information relevant to their lives and context. So we wish to propose the following solution and ask today. One, by investing and supporting and leveraging existing community-based structures, including local media, we can advance the agency and ownership of communities through the co-creation and co-development of solutions. This process ensures credible, verified, and actionable information is accessible and contextualized with the need, perspectives, experiences, and realities of all actors in the information ecosystem. We ask that multilateral organizations should support and build the capacity and agency of community-based structures so that communities are able to meaningfully engage in decision-making, governance, and program development. This entails active and continuous engagement, mainstreaming, sponsorship, and resource based on the principles of trust, consent, accessibility, justice, and open science. 2, in order to address these drivers of disinformation and misinformation, we must hold governments and other authoritative bodies accountable to the communities they serve. We must shift words into action and foster trust and continued dialogue between communities and relevant stakeholders with the ultimate goal of ensuring that communities are at the center of decision-making processes. We ask that government agencies and multilateral organizations must be held accountable and adopt an inclusive, intersectional, responsive, transparent, and community-driven approach to rebuild trust. Funding needs to be transparent and responsive to the communities they are meant to serve and include accountability and oversight mechanisms to ensure impact for the community. And 3, literacy is not simply an issue of being able to read and write. Comprehensive literacy entails critical thinking and analysis, including the ability to discern fact from fiction. Advancing literacy requires us to understand key barriers to access to information and services, including healthcare. We ask that governments and multilateral organizations must invest in transliteracy, ensuring that diverse communities have the resources and skills necessary to access, understand, and critically analyze, assess, and information, especially as it relates to their health and well-being. Additionally, media organizations and practitioners need to be more inclusive and equitable, reflecting the diverse identities and experiences of communities they are working in and reporting on. And our last ask, scientific and public health communities should make efforts to translate complex health and other technical concepts into relevant and accessible content that uses familiar terms and languages. Difficult challenges require innovative and robust solutions, but most important, they require the will and desire to change. What we have presented here requires a global shift from top-down to bottom-up approaches to community-led problem-solving and decision-making. Until we meaningfully shift how we view, engage, and support communities across the globe, mainstreaming their role in response efforts, we will continue to face the core drivers of the infodemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Praveen Gomez. Now I would like to give the floor to João Breda for the second part. João is head of WHO European Office for Prevention and Control of Non-Communicable Diseases in the WHO Regional Office for Europe. João, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am delighted to be with you today, and I would like to express my gratitude to our colleagues in WHO headquarters for the invitation. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night for all of you. I will be reporting and I will be sharing, if you allow me, a couple of slides. I will be reporting about a meeting that we organized recently, actually a couple of days ago, on the connections between the importance of fighting NCDs and misinformation. And please let me know if you can see my slides. So if you can just nod, perhaps I ask Madam Chair to say that, yes, we can.
That's okay, we can see your slides.
Thank you. So we are aware that disinformation and fake news are a growing concern as more and more individuals get their information from digital venues such as search engines, social media platforms. While generally the access to more information on health issues can be really positive, very good, the spread of inaccurate medical information is problematic, and we all know about the possible really negative consequences. We all know that NCDs have a huge impact in the morbidity and mortality and quality of life of citizens across the globe. We know that the impact of misinformation on COVID-19 outcomes has received a lot of attention in recent months. The impact of misinformation on NCD's management and control remains relatively unexplored. And this is why we decided to potentially look into this topic as well in our region. Despite, in fact, because 90% of the mortality in the region are actually related with non-communicable diseases and around 70% of the burden of disease. We also understand that there are ongoing activities and different levels of action that are potentially necessary. So we kind of in reflecting among the team and with stakeholders that perhaps it would be good to organize an initiative around this topic, misinformation and NCDs. And therefore we organized the first meeting. Normally we start with scientists and countries, but we decided we would like to start with civil society, hence and given their level of expertise. So this meeting that I'm reporting to you in terms of reflections was aiming to identify barriers, challenges, and possible ways to fight health disinformation at civil society level, discuss ongoing initiatives, debate the role of NGOs and also academia and their impact on policymaking, to assess the role of civil society and grassroots initiatives, discuss the impact of digital health literacy, showcase also success stories, and we discussed a lot of that. We already been advocating for that, and member states, particularly in the context of WHO, when it comes to NCDs, dealing with this misinformation and engaging and involving more civil society. And we thought it was a good idea and a good sign really to start from there. One of the participants said that COVID has shone a spotlight on this issue, but NCD misinformation has been around for a very long time. It is not enough to simply acknowledge it. We need to take action to fight the societal problem. So what we did, we understood that we would like to consult with, of course, member states, the different stakeholders, particularly the private sector involved, but also civil society. This is where we started, and we called it a triple intent. So the report I'm making today is basically related with the first meeting. So this will continue on civil society. We set up a small meeting a small working group in the region. We established a plan with a few things from, experts, academia, media, social media, member states. This is indefinitely being planned. And we were happy and very lucky to have among us series of very interesting minds from the civil society. And I would like just to share with you some quotes from some of them that you can see actually in the slides. One of them said, "I'm excited to be with you at this action-oriented meeting, thinking about the way forward rather than simply characterizing the problem. We need to ensure that we move beyond the individual level towards the government and societal level." Another one said, "This should start with prenatal parenting classes. We need to build from the ground up on the topic of media literacy. Not all internet sources are created equal. We want to encourage users to think critically whenever they are on the internet." Another one would say, "We understand the importance of evidence-based clinical guidelines. We also need to embrace evidence-based communication strategies." And last one was saying, "This is an unfair battle. The field is tilted against public health. My best friend," he was saying, "was diagnosed with cancer. Before long, she was being deluded with health misinformation, mainly false cures. By the time she presented to medical professionals, it was too late." So we understood and we discussed that we have a few options. A dialogue of truth is very important. Correction by fast checkers is also something to be on the table. Votes for truth, legal options. These were some of the elements that, in fact, the participants in the meeting discussed. And then in discussing possible ways forward, they realized that we realized there are many initiatives ongoing. So maybe a certain level of coordination and learn from them and act is important. Showcase success stories and innovation. collaboration to develop action plans, listen to communities to understand the root causes, not just promoting our version, empower young generation. It is not only about the main post, it's about to follow up and to really engage, influence tech companies to adjust that algorithm not to be manipulated. Some would say detox the algorithm, a very nice expression that we really found very, very interesting. And we are going to continue. This is what I can share with you. We will be also engaging specifically on NCDs, but a lot to learn from COVID and other areas on engaging with countries and with private sector, possibly in the near future. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Praveen Gomez and Joao Breda, for this briefing on what has happened in your track, civil society track. I was very impressed to see your proposed solutions that will be driven by and for communities. I think it's very true that the civil society is very diverse. We have many views, but you have a shared purpose. And this shared purpose is something that we also share with you, which is health of our population and communities. I think your solution to shift words into action is a very good proposal, and that we need indeed community-driven approaches to build trust in our societies. Your proposal to build better literacy, infodemic and health literacy, I think it's very important, and I take your point on having a better translation of science, and we'll have a track on science later on, so I'm sure that they will also propose few things to make this happen. But at the end, I think you are really right that what matters is the will and the desire to change, and moving from a top-down approach to a bottom-up approach, but also a two-way dialogue where different constituencies of the society can discuss and share experience and solution to this infodemic situation. What I really appreciated from our colleagues from Euro office is that he highlighted first the link between NCDs and infodemic, but also COVID-19, because we all know that at-risk people for COVID-19, severe COVID-19, are people with underlying condition, and many of them are non-communicable diseases like diabetes, so cardiovascular disease. So it's very important that we are united on this front as well, that information on non-communicable disease should align with what we say on COVID-19, but also that infodemic, even if the hot topic currently is vaccine and immunization, infodemic is much broader than that, and we need to also look at other topics that are circulating. And what also is very important is to move from this individual approach and individual-centric approach of health to the health of the communities, because this is another layer that is also extremely important, and specifically during pandemic. And what I learned as well is preparedness for infodemic management start in peacetime. And maybe when this large pandemic is over, and I hope it will be soon, we need also to reflect how we can keep the momentum and continue the effort and the collaboration to be much more resilient for the next pandemic. So having said that, now it's really my pleasure to introduce the next track. And we will start with a short video, and we will address the issue of media and journalism and the solution they can provide for infodemic management.
Having breaking news in the palm of our hands 24 hours a day is a double-edged sword. Mass communication helps us reinforce public health measures, but it can also fuel hysteria and stigmatization in the age of COVID-19. The overload of information charges audiences to constantly sort fact from fiction in an age where opinions are reported as fact. As reporters and media professionals, we hope that you'll take full ownership of communicating the truth and managing the infodemic. Our resilience depends on it.
So now I will give the floor to Ida Joste, who is the Global Health Media Advisor, Internews, to take the floor. Ida?
Thank you.
Your
Thank you,
turn.
Dr. Briand. Thank you so much. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening around the globe. I'm Ida Joeste from Internews. As Dr. Briand has said, over 2 Wednesday slots, those of us in the media track really did some soul searching and asked those questions that journalists like to ask: the who, the what, the where, the how, and the why of the infodemic. Exactly why was this such an overwhelming problem? We did some solid thinking also towards solutions, and how we structured this is over 2 Wednesdays. We first looked at challenges and then we looked at solutions. In both of those slots over the 2 Wednesdays, we also had breakout cafes, which we called a repair cafe, to repair what it is that had gone so horribly wrong. And then to also a week later look at how do we prepare? How do we in fact already look ahead to infodemic preparedness, which we fully acknowledged might come around the next time a pathogen hits the world. So we wanted to be fully prepared for what might well happen, because we also acknowledged that infodemics or misinformation has been part of challenging and hard to follow health information even before COVID-19. In session 2, in the panel discussion session, my colleague Genevieve Hutchison from BBC Media Action will tell you about session 2, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about session 1 now. I wanted to also say that in both of the panel discussions, which preceded the breakout sessions, we had representation from around the globe, various regions. We also had representation from what it is that media is now. It is no longer the printed newspaper, as we know. It is across genres, it's across formats, it includes social media, and very importantly, mainstream media, those well-known big names, those well-known personalities that have reported infodemics and of course epidemics and pandemics before, and also community radio, rural media. So the entire spectrum was represented, which is really exciting because the challenge is truly global and all journalists are very much affected by both the pandemic and the infodemic, as you'll see. So in the next slide, because I wanted to just highlight what was so striking about these discussions. As you know, journalists are storytellers, and we thought we'd let these 3 quotes tell the story of the challenges. You could take a minute or half a minute to just read through those. And I wanted to highlight what P. Sainath said, is that as media, it has given us every nerve, every sinew, every vein, every artery, every vessel and bone on display, and we're looking at what that means for ordinary people. So those sinews and bones, both of the problem of the pandemic and how to report it, but also of the infodemic is what Sainath meant. These quotes really truly encapsulated much of the essence of what came out of the breakout session, these repair cafes that we had after the panel discussion. And so I want to just quickly go through some of the key challenges that were identified in virtually all of the breakout sessions, and which indeed the panelists also spoke about. The science moved fast. It moved incredibly fast, and it was particularly tough for journalists who had not specialized in health reporting before to keep up. It was tough even for health journalists. I mean, the very fact that 10 months later, we have viable vaccine candidates of a pathogen we only came to hear of in late December or early January is fast moving science. With that is the difficulty of communicating uncertainty in science or evolving insights in science. So again, if one hadn't focused on health reporting before, this would be a new concept. Even those who had focused on health reporting before know it is a challenge to communicate uncertainties in science, to adopt a tentative tone, and also to, just explain to audiences that guidance may change, for example. This was a particular challenge to journalists. Misinformation, the infodemic, whether through misunderstanding, genuine misunderstanding, in that the science moved so fast and so much of the information was new, or through malicious intent, which we typically call disinformation, moved even faster than this fast-moving science at times. So we thought it's absolutely essential that we take stock and share the tactics and strategies that developed over time. It wasn't immediately obvious to journalists exactly how they should deal with this. Journalists are also individuals in WhatsApp groups and on Facebook pages whose friends forward them information, in addition to the reporting that they then have to structure around this information that come into their laps, if you like. So it was a chance to own up to this overwhelm and to embrace the lessons learned amidst confusion and despair and even lies, and definitely too little time to verify information or to make sense of that information at times. Because remember, a journalist does not only have to verify information, a key task of really deep meaning-making journalism is to make meaning of information, not just to regurgitate or disseminate information. So a huge problem identified absolutely around the globe is that access to information for media is a problem. This may come as a surprise to some because perhaps we think that journalists know the contact details of those in the know. But this time around, journalists felt that access to trusted sources, very important, and real access, absolutely real access to governments and to government data was a huge challenge. And journalists definitely don't want to just make do or make it up. So access should be a given, and in solutions we'll give you more about what we thought could be done about it. A lack of transparency from governments is definitely a huge problem, and with that goes political agendas or perceived political agendas and state overreach as a problem, and how to balance providing true science solutions with growing dissatisfaction from citizens, for instance, over lockdown. So kind of reporting this wicked problem, if you like, was a key challenge for journalists. Then individual and social behavior issues, the fact that we're all affected, and people's relationship with social media, as I mentioned before, those quick shares and the looking for likes is a kind of competing track with credible information in a journalist's life, and something that they need to try and balance. So work-life issues, a challenge even to mental health, was sincerely identified as a challenge. It was noted that there are also journalists out there who don't believe that COVID-19 is real. And this, of course, comes about because of the fact that because of this global problem, suddenly all journalists had to cover this very complex issue. And that might have included COVID, to this day may include COVID denialists. They have peers and they have networks to address this problem, but it is a real problem. And then, I wanted to just say that even while we were focusing on challenges, solutions also started to bubble up from the first session because there's a lot of goodwill. One of them is that journalists said that if they had any background in health and science journalism, it helped tremendously. If they had trusted contacts among scientists and others in the pandemic response, it helped tremendously. And a very big last word from me is a new culture of sharing bubbled up through this pandemic. Journalists are often lone wolves. They're after a scoop, but brainstorming, networks, WhatsApp groups, and other support systems, and a culture of collaboration shaped much of their coverage, which is very encouraging for us.
Thank you, Ida. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to talk very quickly about what was discussed during the second session, so some of the solutions. During the second session, we had quite a diverse range of participants, and we talked about what the wider public needs from the media sector, and so therefore what the media sector could do more of and what the media sector needs from other parts of society. And this overlaps and complements much of what has been said already today. So in terms of meeting audiences' needs, we agreed that communication cannot be one way, and that this includes media listening to and engaging with communities and giving people space to ask the questions they need to through media. So helping people to feel heard and also helping us as media and wider society to meet one another's needs. We also talked about the fact that as Ida's mentioned, many people cannot differentiate between facts and misinformation. They don't have the background understanding. And that particularly during lockdowns, media may be one of the very few or only means to engage with people. So we looked at media taking responsibility for helping audiences to have a more detailed understanding of health and scientific information, demystify health and scientific and medical development processes, identify and call out, counter and counter the most prevalent mis and disinformation trends without amplifying. So some of the accountability role that media plays, and help audiences understand infodemics and develop the skills to manage them. We also talked about media using a range of platforms and communication approaches. So different styles and formats. It's not just about news. Some people learn best or prefer information through personal stories, drama or comedy, and they want to see or hear empathy and compassion. And we talked about media being a reliable and trustworthy source of learning across all media platforms, so being transparent about what we know and don't know, and always verifying before broadcasting. So in order to do this, we also talked about the need to collaborate more across the media sector to be able to learn from one another and help one another find solutions, and to be able to build more networks with experts to help break down complex information. We also talked about diversifying networks that media organizations might have already or individuals might have to help to challenge echo chambers, understand where mis and disinformation is coming from, and challenge our own assumptions. We also talked a lot about the need to learn from one another, to learn from past experiences, for example, during the Ebola outbreak in West Africa or around HIV, and to learn from experts. So really building this network between media and NGOs and civil society. Sorry, if we can, oh yes, NGOs and civil society, science and research, and also to support the networking and the engagement with each other, looking for support from the digital and technology sector to help support these networks, and with providing some sort of accessible central resource or collection of resources for updated, verified information from health. And again, really emphasizing that in engagement and communication between country health authorities, between UN agencies and multilaterals and the media, that we're also looking for this two-way communication and collaborating. So not just the press briefings, but access to resources, access to training to help us all get better in how we communicate around the infodemic and the pandemic. And then on our last slide, right at the end of the discussions, we looked at making commitments, both commitments that individuals could make and commitments that the wider society, wider media sector could make. So if you could just go to the last slide for me, please. And again, in the commitments, the commitments really centered around things like what we can do for our audiences, about better collaboration, about taking more responsibility and not adding to the infodemic, as well as about preparing for the next infodemic. So I'm sorry, that's quite a rushed speed through, but just to say that we will be sharing more detailed lessons learned and solutions that have come out of this in the near future, and we will all be continuing to work together to help media meet the communication needs of the wider public. So a huge thank you to WHO and to everyone who's been involved with this conference, to the organisers, and very much to the participants. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ida Jost and Geneviève Etchison. I didn't have time to introduce Geneviève, and she's from the BBC Media Action. So thanks a lot, both of you, for this very comprehensive feedback from your sessions. Indeed, you said that it has been tough for media and journalists. This period has been tough, I think, for everybody. And what I really appreciate from you is that you touch upon your challenges, which were making sense of something that is new, complex, fast evolving, being able also to manage the uncertainty in science and make sense about it, and how it was challenging for you to have access to trusted sources of information. So I think this is very important for all of us because if we are together, we can also flag for you what are the trusted sources of information and collectively manage this path towards truth and trust. What is also extremely important, what you highlighted, is this new culture of sharing. I think we are facing all a new phenomenon, a new challenges as well, and so it's great if it can develop. We can develop new solutions as well to face this, and a new culture of sharing seems very appealing, in my opinion, as well as you mentioned that the compassion that you are calling for. So more collaboration, two-way communication and dialogue, listening, learning, all these are really important words, I think, and we are really much looking forward to a complete report of your discussion so that we can incorporate this in our future action, but also in the future trainings that we will develop for infodemic managers, and that we can continue this journey together with media and journalists. So now we are going to give the floor to the digital health and tech sector, and we start as usual with a short video. Thanks.
Infodemic propagates online, spreading information and misinformation faster than ever before. But tech companies are mounting a response. The question is, how can we leverage the latest data-driven approaches to promote high-quality information and slow the spread of misinformation? What digital transformation do we need to scale up and roll out to stimulate positive health impacts? These are the questions we seek to answer. And this is the Tech World's initiative to manage the infodemic.
So thank you very much, Andy. It's a colleague of mine, so nice to see him on the screen. And I will give the floor to Irene J. Liu from News Lab. She's the lead of this News Lab from APAC in Google. Irene,
thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Briand, and thank you so much to the organizers at the World Health Organization for giving us the opportunity to talk about the importance of collaboration between health providers, disseminators of information, educators, civil society, journalism, and of course the tech sector. I think one of the features, if I can start from kind of a high level of the pandemic, is that really one of the most difficult aspects, I think, of the pandemic has been the isolation that people have felt. They are physically separated from loved ones and family, and also from the traditional institutions that would provide them with information. And I think that this is why we've seen an acceleration of the importance of technology in bringing people together, as well as disseminating information. This is a trend that started basically since the internet began decades ago, but really this pandemic has really increased this. And as we see more and more people come online around the world, this is becoming an increasingly important issue. And I think that one of the features of where technology stands is in constantly focusing on the user, meeting the user where they are, and taking opportunity in those moments to provide high quality information. I personally can speak from the position of Google, which is where I work, and the partnerships that we have built across many different sectors, including NGOs, as well as civil society, journalism, and others. And I think that one of the things that we really feel is crucial to this work is the importance of understanding where people are coming from when they come to our products. So when they come to Google, when they come to search, they are seeking answers to questions. And we feel it is a very, very deep responsibility of ours to ensure that when they come to us with those questions, that we can provide them with the highest quality authoritative information as possible. And that we acknowledge that these sources not only have to be trustworthy by a kind of universal standard, but also understand the local nuances of where trust comes from. And so that's why we've been so appreciative and grateful for our partnerships with the World Health Organization and other sectors of society to be able to provide that high quality information when people come to us. And I can speak on behalf of all other, many other tech companies as well. We recently had a panel with TikTok, ByteDance, with Facebook, WhatsApp, and other tech companies. And the overarching theme from that discussion, which I know that is going to be linked to, that you should take a look at, is the importance of collaboration and understanding the user and meeting them where they are. Just to give a few concrete examples of how we do this at Google, we of course have a number of products. One of the key features is Google search. So when people are coming to search, they're actually seeking answers to questions. They're seeking information. And so it was really important to us very early on to partner with the World Health Organization and other health authorities to ensure that when people are seeking information, that they were getting the highest quality authoritative information possible. And so what we did was we created a user experience, a specific page, a designated page that featured information from trustworthy, credible sources, as well as infographics and other formats of visual representation that would be useful to users. In addition to that, we on YouTube, people are seeking information not just through text, but also through video now. And so we wanted to make sure that as people went to YouTube to search information, that they would receive prompts for high quality authoritative information, even if they're seeking, if they're looking for other types of content as well. And so when someone searches for any COVID-19 related information on YouTube, they would be served with a flag that would show, a link to the World Health Organization and other local health organizations as well. And those prompts from information panels on YouTube have been viewed 400 billion times since we've launched that product. This also is the case for Google News. We've designated a special section on COVID-19. Google Maps, I mean, it's amazing now when you think about the way that people consume information. It's not just about text and video and photographs, it's also about geography and finding information that way. Another thing that has been really important to us is giving the opportunity for authoritative sources to be able to proactively reach out to audiences as well, which is why since the pandemic began, we've actually given over $250 million in ad grants to help more than 100 government agencies around the world run critical public service announcement campaigns about COVID-19. And actually we just announced, I believe, it depends on where you are in the world, but about a day ago, we announced an additional $15 million in ad grants specifically to the World Health Organization to assist in their global campaign. But these are product features. I think that really at the core of what we really wanted to do is to help to support this ecosystem of information sharing that is the focus of this whole conversation and this whole conference. We don't think that technology alone can solve any of these issues. Certainly we, as a company, spend a lot of time focusing on user behavior, understanding users, and understanding our products and building our products around that. We believe that kind of user-centric focus is very helpful in these moments. But certainly we need to partner with those who are in the field, who are doing the research and who can communicate this information in the most responsible way possible, whether you're talking about health educators, healthcare providers, researchers, civil society, and journalism. And so along those lines, one of the things that we've really tried to do is build those partnerships and listen to ensure that we are providing as much value add as possible. So whether it's providing tools and training to journalists on how to better understand the questions that people are asking, to be able to have tools for verification, to identify misinformation, and to be able to provide fact checking, whether it's surfacing fact checks on our products so that the content that journalists and educators are providing is shown and rises above the kind of morass of misinformation that we see. We also want to make sure that we can provide and support resources to enable that information sharing. So for example, we've created a $1.5 million fund to support a vaccine media hub that will work in multiple languages around the world. And also understanding users and taking that data-centric approach that Andrew mentioned in the opening video. We want to make sure that we, as a field in technology, as well as more broadly, understand what types of content at which moments are most effective in resonating a correct information to people. It's all well and good if we have the information, but if we're not communicating it in a way and in a place that people can receive it, we're not doing our job. And so that's one of the things that we really want to work on, and in collaboration with researchers as well as the broader community. And then finally, as one last point, I think that a lot of the things that we've discussed at this moment have been really focused on when people have already sought information. But I think one of the things that we've seen throughout this pandemic is the need and the increased need for media literacy. At the end of the day, people still trust their families, their friends. They may not proactively go and seek information. And if they do seek information, are they actually looking at the source? I think we need to really address that point and understand that when people are sharing information or misinformation, a lot of times it is not coming from a negative or a bad place. It's coming from a place of care. And so what we need to do through our collaborations, through our partnerships, is to really work with individuals and users to try to bridge that gap and make sure that when people are sharing information, it does come from that very, very, kind of warm and fuzzy place, but that it also has rigor behind it. And so again, I'd like to really very much thank everyone who has participated in this conference. It is significant that on a Friday that we have so many people who are participating, and really looking forward to continuing the conversation and the partnership across all these sectors. So thank you very much.
Many thanks, Irene J. Liu from Google. And indeed, your perspective was extremely interesting to see that although you are user-centric focus, as you said, and you are paying a lot of attention to high quality information, you are also very conscious about the link that those platforms are building between people. And as you rightly said, I mean, this pandemic is also characterized by a lot of feeling of being isolation, and bringing people together is really added value. But you also highlighted how partnerships are important. And I fully agree with you. I think no one can deal with this infodemic alone, and we really need to be on board. And your suggestion to increase media literacy is well taken. And I think another speaker later on the UN engagement will also talk about it. So today, up to now, we have heard the feedback from the health track, the community track, the media and journalism track, and the digital company track. And so we have already quite a good overview of all the challenges, but also all the solutions that have been provided so far. We are going to have now a short break again, away from computer break, and we will resume in 9 minutes if you allow us. Thanks a lot.
My brother, my sister, papa, mama, and pikin. Corona, no big pass us. We go fight time, we go win. As long as we remember to always do the right thing. Wash your hands, love each other, we go win. Oh. Corona, na the virus, we the worry human being. He no get Lego, but he dey waka from person to person. But we fit beat time, we fit stop time if we maintain good hygiene and practice social distancing. We go, we know. No shaking hands with your neighbor. Blow them a kiss from afar. Use soap and water to wage war. Let's show this thing who we are. We are special, we're courageous, we are awesome human beings. We dey super, we get power, we can conquer anything. If we hear word and obey laws and exercise discipline, wash your hands, love each other, we go, we know. If it be like say you know well, like it's something they do you, and you feel say, you believe say, you get a seed to do you, and your body no grisogy, like it's something they do you. No let panic finish you, you go, we know. Self-isolate for the sake of all the people that you love. Oh, don't go around spreading rumors, 'cause fake news won't help anyone. You are special, you're courageous, you're a caged human being. You too much, oh, you get power, you can conquer anything. Only if you hear word and obey laws and exercise discipline. Wash your hands, love one another, we go, we know. My brother, my sister, papa, mama, and pikin. COVID-19, no big pass, we go fight and we go win. Just as long as we remember to always do the right thing. Wash your hands, love each other, we go, we know.
Restez chez vous, oh, oh, ce n'est pas tuant. C'est sorti qu'on veut tout cela qui peut nous tuer. Le Covid n'a pas d'amis, il a débuté en Chine. Il détruit déjà le monde, des dizaines de milliers de morts. Quand on nous demande de prendre des mesures, c'est pour nos vies. Si nous ne faisons rien, si nous ne faisons rien, on court un risque, un très grand risque. Évitez le Covid, éternions tous sur nos coudes. Saluons-nous avec les coudes et portons vite tous un masque. Évitons les groupes de masse, gardons tous nos distances. Lavons-nous toujours les mains et comme ça, ça va aller. Corona, Corona, ennemi commun. Corona, Corona, ennemi commun. Ensemble au combat, tu ne passeras pas par nous. Nous allons te barrer la route avec nos mesures barrières. Appelez le 1510 en cas d'urgence. C'est le numéro vert et il est gratuit. On enterre déjà les gens dans des fosses communes. Et Seigneur, prends pitié. Se protéger, c'est protéger les autres, mes amis. Restons soudés face à cette pandémie. Ensemble allons tous au combat. Surtout ne baissons pas les bras. Ne laissons pas le gouvernement se battre seul. Car une seule main ne peut pas tout faire. Parlons-en autour de nous, car les images parlent d'elles-mêmes. Elles emportent tout ce qu'on aime. Parlons-en autour de nous. Corona, Corona, ennemi commun. Corona, Corona, ennemi commun. Ensemble au combat, tu ne passeras pas par nous. Nous allons te barrer la route avec nos mesures barrières.
So welcome again, everyone, to this third conference on infodemic management. We will now introduce the next track, which is United Nations and multilateral organization. And we will first, of course, start with a short video.
Across the UN system, there is a common rally cry for more data transparency and increased access to reliable information about COVID-19. But with more information comes a flood of updated, outdated, and manipulated data that hinders public health. Society is in a match-up with the COVID-19 infodemic. However, the UN and multilateral organizations stand firmly on the side of society. We are ready to integrate policies that combat health disinformation and enable transparent data to be available to all.
Many thanks for this introduction. Now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Guy Berger, who is the Director for Strategies and Policies in the field of communication and information at UNESCO. Guy, it's really nice to see you here today. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, and I hope you can hear me okay. So just a quick introduction of myself. I work at UNESCO, as you said. People, of course, know UNESCO very well from World Heritage, but the work I do at UNESCO is in a strong program to deal with information and communication, especially about the right to freedom of expression. And I think there's two dimensions of this rights that are super important for this whole study of infodemics. So the one is your right to impart information and opinion, of which, for example, your right to press freedom and to make public communication is an example. It's so important to be able to impart information and opinion because, for example, that's how we know about the story of disinformation. Journalists are investigating it. Journalists are also showing that it's still there in social media, despite efforts by some of the companies to deal with it. So the right to impart. Then the right to seek and receive, which points to freedom of information, your right to have access to data, for example, about in infection rates and so on, and procurement. And it's about transparency. And the right to seek and receive information is also about issues like media and information literacy, which were discussed or touched on before, because people, if you access information or content and you don't have the literacy to understand issues around it, it doesn't really give you effective access. Now, the operative word in terms of imparting information and seeking, receiving information is information, because we're not speaking about imparting disinformation or seeking disinformation or access to disinformation. But of course, in the infodemic, you've got this whole bundle. And so we need to remember, and at UNESCO, we try and do this in the infodemic, how do we keep the focus on the right to information in as much as we are combating this other kind of content, which we wouldn't even want to call information, but it's content. And so the challenge in the infodemic is, how do we increase imparting, seeking, and access to information on the one hand, so elevating, and how do we reduce the supply, the transmission, and the receipt of false and misleading content? And then how do we make sure the actions on this side don't become actions that weaken this side? And so that, by way of introduction, is where UNESCO comes from in the work in this infodemic sphere. Thank you.
Many thanks, Guy, for this word of introduction. And indeed, what matters is really finding the right balance so that we can protect freedom of expression and access to information. And I will now give the floor to Miguel Luengo Oroz, who is the Chief Data Scientist at the United Nations Global Pulse. Miguel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Sylvie. So, I mean, just as an introduction, so UN Global Pulse is the UN Secretary General's innovation initiative on data innovation and artificial intelligence. Okay, so we develop tools, policies, and frameworks to help build a future where, like, these digital technologies can be used safely and responsibly as for the public good. So, through our network of innovation labs, we work together with our UN colleagues, government, private sector, academia, and civil society to really test and deploy these new innovations, these operational tools. So since the beginning of the pandemic and the infodemic, we have been helping our colleagues from WHO, UNESCO, and others really on the operational response on the ground. So, I mean, I'd like to just take the advantage now and ask Guy if he can tell us a little bit about, I mean, which can be like the main challenges that we find inside the UN family.
Thanks, Miguel, and I will ask you a question after I respond to your one.
Okay.
So the first point I'd make is that congratulations to World Health Organization for convening this third conference, and indeed, World Health Organization is on the front line of this infodemic as it impacts on health. But in the UN more broadly, the infodemic, conceived more broadly, also impacts other UN organizations. For example, UN Development Program, they do a lot of work supporting the credibility of elections. So obviously, the infodemic is a problem for the integrity of free and fair elections. Then you have a UN Environmental Program. They have to wrestle with false and misleading information about climate change. At UNESCO, we do a lot of work on press freedom, safety of journalists, and we have to deal with now disinformation being used to attack journalists. And we train a lot of journalists. So now we have to figure out how to train journalists not to be hoaxed by disinformation, and indeed how to dig in and tell the whole story. Now, if you also think of UN organizations that deal with migration, with refugees, disasters, you know, so it goes, the whole UN family in its respective components that are related to the different SDGs, they're all confronted increasingly by this infodemics challenge. And despite all the different fields that the different UN family members are working in, there's a lot that's happening in the disinformation space that's relevant. So sometimes the actors who are involved are overlapping. They're not siloed. often their techniques are echoing each other. They use the same internet companies as their channels, and they often cross-platform amplify. And in the end, of course, there's just one public that gets caught up and even implicated in this whole infodemic issue. So despite all the different interests in the UN and the different mandates, we do have a common interest and insight into how one sphere is working. So just as the rest of the UN can and is learning a lot about how the World Health Organization and how health infodemic managers are operating, so those of you who are in the health sector, you can benefit as World Health Organization shares with you the insights that come out of work elsewhere in this big ecosystem. So the challenge then is to really work as one UN and learn the general lessons about infodemics. But very quickly, we have another challenge. And this is, I think people could keep this in mind. The purveyors of disinformation, which then can convert into misinformation, these are often, as everybody knows, leading political figures who are from the member states that make up our UN organizations, and they define our mandates. And so we have to look at this multi-stakeholder set of responses, because civil society and media can call out presidents for doing disinformation, for example. But if you're in the UN or if you're a government employee, you have to find alternative ways to tackle this, because you can't very well go and point fingers at those who are your bosses, so to speak. But of course, we're concerned. We have a mandate and we have to fulfill it. We just have to do it in a way that really is leveraging the strengths of the UN organizations, taking into account also the parameters of these organizations. So I hope that sets out some of the challenges. So let me ask you now, Miguel, from a UN point of view, and particularly from Global Pulse's global role in the UN, how do you see the data and research challenge in terms of the knowledge that the UN as a whole needs to get to play its part in tackling the infodemic?
Yeah. So I think we need to do more to see the big picture. For me, sometimes I feel that we are fighting the infodemic a little bit blindly and in the trenches, and we really need to see the big picture. And for that, I think we need to be able to quantify, to monitor, and to evaluate, how our policies and how the infodemic is happening, okay? So we can build the foundations on data-driven policy. So I think that is what we're trying to do. But at this stage, we don't have enough science nor tools to understand the viral infodemic spread of the messages, across the platforms. And as we know, social media favors emotive content, regardless of the scientific or the health basis. And I think we are all experiencing a lack of algorithmic transparency from many of the stakeholders, from internet information, social media platforms. I think we need to understand those flows of information, to understand the big picture, and help coordinate all other actors and provide the right information, making sure that arrives to everybody. But which are like the solutions that for information sharing that are being shared within the UN?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you touched on an interesting point, Miguel, because you were speaking about how data can convert ultimately into knowledge. And in between those two, we have a kind of information. And so what we're trying to do in the UN, as you know, of course, is we're trying to share information, and then you are coming in to enrich with data, and hopefully we can convert both the data and the information into knowledge. So we've had two intra-agency dialogues within the UN in the past couple of months. We had a third one that reached out also to two other international organizations to see how they are dealing with this from that vantage point. And then, of course, there's the World Health Organization Africa Infodemic Alliance, which involves several members of the UN. And UNDP have been exchanging information and doing a global consultation to try and get more insight and information about what's happening in terms of people's perceptions on the infodemic. And so I think that there is some momentum. There was actually a joint statement at the UN General Assembly a bit earlier this year by, I think it was 8 or 9 UN organizations. So we have a lot of momentum, and I think this is good. And at the same time, this momentum of exchanging information has educated us all, certainly me personally, in these exchanges. I've realized that this infodemic, it's a bit like understanding the internet and internet companies like a supermarket, because suppose you want to find out about people's diets. Well, you can go into the supermarket and you can see that there's a couple of security guards in the supermarket to see that nobody's tampering with the goods on the shelves. At the same time, we begin to recognize there are no independent health inspectors coming in to visit those premises. And then what I've also learned through these exchanges in the UN is that we have to go a bit deeper to see the deeper logic of the venue, like what kinds of products are on offer in the supermarket? Where do they come from? Do they have quality labels? What is being presented in prime locations to encourage us to buy? And what's the purpose of this? And so in a nutshell, I've learned, and I think others in the UN have learned, moderation is really important in this internet space, but curation, the basic curated environment and its business model is also super important, and we have to take into account both. I hope that's an example of the kind of insight we're getting in the UN through this information sharing. Now, let me ask you, Miguel, at the level of research and data sharing within UN organizations and between UN organizations and others, give us a snapshot, if you can, of where we are with that.
Yeah, I think that even before like the data and the research, I think something that is happening and something I'm just linking with what the UK government representative said before, we are starting to have like new profiles, new skills, new capabilities inside our UN agencies. And we're seeing this happening also in governments and other organizations, which are fluent in this new like data science space, in this data space, which, as you have said before, can go deeper in the discussions of what is algorithmic transparency, what makes sense. I mean, which are these automatic filters, which are shaping the infodemic environment. So I think that's like, for me, one of the things that we are moving ahead inside the UN is really like building these capacities as one important building block. Then there are, initiatives all over the system. We have seen information volunteers from the Verified campaign. When other organizations like the EU is putting a lot of effort on collaboration with fact-checking organizations. And perhaps one thing which, one particular example from our side, which has is a collaboration between many agencies, is working, for instance, not just on social media, but also as our following what our colleagues from civil society said, like working on radio, really using radio as a communication, which is for people, but also using tools to monitor radio stations. Out of the 7,000 languages which are in the world, just 100 are in the digital space. So that's clear that not everybody is accessing the right health information, and we have the tools with all this machine learning and digital technologies to make sure that we can leave no voice behind. So I guess that's one of our important contributions, and I think the UN collaboration around these communities which have more problems to get good access. So, what will be the asks that you will have for next year? What will be the actions and the things that you have seen that we as the UN family are taking for moving ahead?
Well, I think what you just said, Miguel, is that this UN knowledge and information sharing internally has an external feed out also to strengthen other actors out in that space. And I think that is a very important thing we will, as UN family, continue to do, and we must do it in the coming year. I think, though, what we also have to do is to strengthen the norm that truth matters. Not that truth is simple, but that truth matters, because we still face real challenges to this. And without having truth, we don't have a standard to promote peace and progress. So I think as UN, its global role in terms of saying what is acceptable conduct of all actors, norms become so important, and that we have to do a lot of mobilization of our different constituencies to help play their part along with us. And I think our informal dialogue can actually, within the UN, can help us strengthen this. And we may reach a point also that we can have, as UN in the coming year, a really serious dialogue with the internet companies, because they are the core vectors of the infodemic. And so what we want to do is make sure they're not just enabling, but in some cases fueling the infodemic, but they do become more geared towards deep solutions, and with some urgency, and in fields besides the health crisis. Now, I think we've probably overlapped our time a bit, Miguel, but just quickly, do you, from your point of view of UN data, what do you think in 2021 are the top imperatives that the UN should be asking of itself and of others concerning the infodemic from a data lens?
So, I mean, just to go very quickly, I think we have to look for common principles and approaches when engaging with platforms on the issues on like accountability and transparency. I think one key challenge here is defining metrics and common reference data sets, which allow us to evaluate like the scaled infodemics and the performance of our tools. As we were saying, I mean, we really need to be able to measure to see the big picture at the scale. Another key issue that I think is going to attract more and more attention is going to be like really making sure that the underlying infrastructure, which is made of artificial intelligence, of those digital platforms, is trustworthy, is ethical, and respect human rights. Okay? And I think that is one of really of our key challenges. Just a couple of more notes. One is I think we all, I mean, not just the UN, but all the stakeholders in this conference, we really need to anticipate what is going to be the future of disinformation and misinformation. Tomorrow is going to be something different. I mean, and it's going to be a different social network. It's going to be a different way of communicating. So really, we need to have a future foresight. We really need to see what is coming before it's coming, okay? So we can like surf the tsunami. And that has to be done with the help also of science. And we need all science, all hands on deck, including like data science, AI experts, machine learning experts, social scientists, and public health experts. So I think this is really a truly multidisciplinary challenge. But I mean, I would be speaking for a few minutes more, but I think we already passed our time. But you have any last comment, Guy, or we hand back to Sylvie?
I think we should hand back, but again, I just repeat that the World Health Organization and its constituency of experts and infodemic managers, we are watching you with great interest, and we are learning a lot from you, and we hope we can continue to feed our insights back into the work you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Guy and Miguel. And really, it was nice to see that first, as UN, we are a family. And this is very important. And indeed, we have done a lot of efforts to work together in spite of the very busy agenda we all have. And thanks, Guy, for highlighting the challenges that we are facing as UN organization due to the very nature of our governance. And thanks, Miguel, for highlighting also the way forward with quantifying, monitoring, evaluating infodemic and interventions, and anticipating what would be the challenges of the future. And as you say, rightly, we are here to also support all our member states and the countries, and more than 130 countries already adopted or pushed for a resolution at the UN Assembly to have a collective action to manage infodemic better. And we will support all those countries and all those communities as a UN family based on our UN principles, and including, of course, the protection of human rights. So thanks a lot to both of you. for this perspective. And I would like just to say that Guy mentioned that UNESCO sometimes people don't know the full scope of UNESCO activities. I think I can say the same for WHO, and just highlight that the music you have been hearing was from some of the trainees of the Infodemic manager training, and in particular from Indira, who is in Cameroon. So I think this shows that WHO also value very much arts and not only pure science. Thank you. So to go next, now we are going to the final track, the last track, which is science and research. And we will start as usual with a short video.
The global health community is facing searing backlash in the wake of COVID-19. Wide circulation of misinformation is raising skepticism in science and biotechnology. This highlights a gap in science literacy that we must address. If we want to achieve the best possible health outcomes, we must understand the public's perception and communicate scientific information more clearly. As leaders in science, our goal is to identify best practices for reporting science so people know better how to manage infodemics that come in tandem with evolving science.
Many thanks. And so now we are going to give the floor to Susie Wiles, who is a microbiologist and science communicator from the University of Auckland in New Zealand. Unfortunately, because of the time difference, Susie cannot be physically with us today, or even if it's virtual, or maybe she is online because for her it's extremely early in the morning. But fortunately, she pre-recorded a video as well, and she will explain us what are the solution or the challenges and the solution from this track that she can share with us.
Tēnā koutou katoa, and warm Pacific greetings to all. My name is Dr. Susie Wiles, and I'm a scientist at the University of Auckland in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I have the privilege today of reporting back to you all on the science and research track, which looked at the role of scientists in contributing to the infodemic. Our discussions converged on three main themes: the way we do research, the way that research is curated, and the way that research is communicated to policymakers and the public. Today, I'm going to take you through each of these themes and talk about the challenges and the solutions, and then give you a call to arms. I'm going to start with this quote from Ed Yong that I think sums up our track quite well. What he's talking about is how science is being portrayed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And he says, "This is how science actually works. It is less the parade of decisive blockbuster discoveries that the press often portrays, and more a slow, erratic stumble towards ever less uncertainty." So if we start with challenge one, the way we do research, that is best described as this slow, erratic stumble towards ever less uncertainty, at least under normal circumstances. What we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic is a very rapid, erratic stumble towards ever less uncertainty, although maybe with some certainty put in there. So what we've seen is an abundance of really poor studies, large amounts of waste and duplication, and a real imbalance of topics. Some parts of the pandemic are being really overstudied, and others are being ignored completely, it seems. For example, we've got lots and lots of clinical trials going on of various types, but almost no trials looking at non-drug interventions, which are the types that are actually, or the interventions that are actually being used the most during this pandemic. This is partly, I think, because of a flavor of the month. So obviously we're in a major crisis, and so lots of researchers are pivoting towards working on COVID-19. This is both a good and a bad thing, where we're getting lots of people, using their talents to understand the pandemic, but also people who perhaps are working in areas now that they would not have normally worked in before. This is partly because people want to use their skills to help understand the pandemic, but there might also be some who are using this for a little bit of what we call academic profiteering. So they're applying their skills perhaps in ways that are not best suited to them, and contributing to the infodemic in this way. So what were the solutions proposed? Well, the main one is to do good quality, collaborative, ethical research. We really need to be expanding networks for collaboration across country, between countries, within countries, and we really need to promote transparency and data sharing. That way we can see who is doing what and when. And there needs to be a real change to providing real-time feedback on studies as they're being done, rather than waiting until the peer review process once studies are finished. So if we can do this, we can do much better quality research, perhaps ensuring that the best methodologies are being used. The second challenge is the curation of research. And really what this boils down to is the fact that when we are curating all our research together, for a long time we've been using paywall journals and a slow and biased peer review system that's really not fit for purpose. And we're very much seeing this during a pandemic, where policymakers, medics, and scientists need faster access to research and results. And they need to be equitably available to everybody, rather than just those who can afford to access paywall journals. What we've seen during the pandemic then has been a real move towards the use of preprints, where academic or scientific results are made available before they've gone through peer review. And what this has really led to has been an immediate and widespread sharing of unvetted scientific information in the public domain. This has allowed scientists to do a lot of that vetting themselves, but has also allowed others to access that unvetted information and share it with whatever their conclusions have been. And we've also seen a lot of the use of press releases as well by companies who might be doing research, whether that's the clinical trials, rather than also using the preprint format. What are the solutions for this? Well, we really need to be proactive as scientists, ensuring that the work that we publish, however we publish it, is understood as intended. One of the solutions for this might be to include plain language summaries in everything that we do, and encouraging the good use of preprints. Making sure everybody understands that these have not been properly vetted, but they are a format in which they can be vetted. We also need to be supporting fact checkers, so, to people with expertise actually being able to look at all the data. And the one big thing we need to do is to move to a transparent form of post-publication peer review. So we all know that the peer review system is not perfect, and really we all need to be taking part, peer reviewing papers as they are, once they're already published, or as preprints, and really moving to the idea that manuscripts should be living documents, rather than just at the end they've been peer reviewed by just a few people and then taken as the kind of final word. The final challenge we talked about was that of communication. And what we've seen here really is a potential way of really eroding public trust in experts. And that's partly because this is such a fast moving area where our understanding is changing almost by the day, so that you end up with experts saying one thing one day and then something quite different the next day. Obviously, things are moving very fast, and people need, policymakers need information very fast. But this is quite different to how science normally works. So I think what we've had is we've never really had to explain to the public how science really works, and the fact that this this is already happening, that this people changing their minds as the evidence changed. But what people are seeing is that being done in real time and out in the open. So what we've also got is an abundance of new communication channels and self-appointed experts. And all of this is certainly creating confusion around what information is real, what isn't, and what can be trusted. So our solutions for communication is really that researchers really need to be willing to be timely and transparent about their communication, to let people know what they do know and what they don't know, and to really acknowledge that uncertainty, but also the trade-offs that people will be making. What's also really clear in this pandemic is that people the public haven't perhaps understood how policymakers make decisions. And so they'll be confused about the fact that their policymakers in different countries might be taking the same evidence, but making completely different decisions. So being transparent about the evidence that scientists are giving that's helping contribute to those decisions is really important. Scientists and communicators also need to work better together to communicate work in different ways that will reach different audiences, and be really clear about the benefit of exploring new methods of communication so that information, good information, can reach a wider audience. So our call to action is very much that scientists themselves should be doing good quality collaborative and ethical research. You know, we have good mechanisms for all of that. People need to be using them. We need to embrace transparency and learn to communicate beyond our peers. We have to remember that the research does not end with the publication of a peer-reviewed journal article. And all of these things are well and good, though, to encourage scientists to do, but we really need to make sure that funders and governments and institutions stop actively disincentivizing scientists to do all of these things. The way our systems work at the moment, they very much benefit those who are not working collaboratively, who perhaps are doing rushed science, who don't embrace transparency, and who don't focus on communication. And so if we get those incentives to change, then we should be able to get scientists to change. And with that, I'll thank you very much.
Many thanks, Susie. And I don't know if you are online. No. Okay. So otherwise, I would have given you the floor. But very many thanks for those very clear slides. And I think it's what you have said is really true. It has been a challenge for science. I have to say that at WHO, we very much push forward to have rapid publication of studies and scientific data during emergencies, because we had seen in previous outbreaks and epidemics that usually scientific publication come nearly 2 years after the outbreak, and so it's not very useful. So we really encourage this fast track publication process, but at the same time we have seen that then it's a bit rushed, and we don't have enough time for peer review, and so we need also to look at how we can improve this fast track process of publication, and how we can ensure, as you said, that science is communicated properly and is really helpful for decision making. And probably we need also to look at new solutions to incentivize good science but at the same time timely science. So I think those really important points will help us enormously to move forward, because as we said initially at the beginning of this conference, we have developed a new scientific discipline called the infodemiology, where we have brought together a number of scientists dealing with different type of science, epidemiologists, data scientists, social scientists, and etc. And I think all what we can learn of the initial struggle of scientists at the beginning of this pandemic will be extremely useful to develop this new scientific discipline and help us to move faster and better towards excellence in science, especially in infodemiology. So I think we have nearly reached our time. I would like to thank enormously all the track leads, all the participants in all tracks as well. Thank you very much, all the presenters, Neville Calera, Praveen Gomez, Joao Breda, Geneviève Hutchinson, Aida Jost, Irene J. Liu, Guy Berger, Miguel Huego Oros, Susie Wiles for this second part. Also thank the speakers at the first part of this meeting. I think we have done a very large tour of what is infodemic management from the perspective of many sectors of the society. It's difficult to summarize all of this, but what I think we have learned all together, that there are a few things that are really important if we want to better manage infodemic. First, we need really to listen. listening is very important, not only listening on social media, but listening our peers, listening other sectors, listening communities as well, listening to concerns. This is really important. And in our world where sometimes people put more emphasis on speaking than hearing, I think it's very important for us to reflect how we can develop better methods to listen. The second thing that is also very important is communication, but communicating very high quality information and at the same time favoring the two-way dialogue. And it has been highlighted by many speakers that it's not one-way communication, it's really two-way communication, and how we can really engage in making sure that it's happening. The third thing that is really important is that we need to debunk myths. We need to look for the truth. We need to have fact checkers. So it's also very important to track misinformation and disinformation, because it's important also to know what is circulating out there, and so that we can also provide good information to respond to the needs of the people. And finally, what is also extremely important is to engage with communities, different kinds of communities, to empower those communities to find their own solution. And I think this is what we have tried throughout this conference, is to give the floor to different communities, whether it's a health community, the science community, the civil society communities, I mean, different communities of practice or communities, geographic communities, to find their own solution to this new phenomenon. And we learned today that overall, what is really important is partnering, working together, collaborate, because no one has a solution. It's a very complex situation, and we all have a piece of the solution and we need to put it together. So definitively, infodemic management is really the challenge of this 21st century. And we need to develop new methods, new solutions, reach outside our own sectors and countries and communities to find those solutions. So I think we have started a big journey, a long journey, but so far it has been very pleasant. I think what we have seen as well is that people have this willingness of sharing things and collaborating, and I think it has been fantastic. This community starting small, but now it's already very big. I heard that there are more than 200 signatories already for the call to action, and I hope that we will have thousands or millions of signatories by 15 February, so that we can really say that we are all together in this journey, and we are all together finding solution to this infodemic that is affecting us nowadays. So thanks a lot to everyone. It's Friday. I know that in some part of the world, Friday is a holiday, and usually people are not working. So, but what I would like to thank you all really for being with us today, sharing those great findings from each of the 6 tracks. And I just give you rendezvous on the 15th of February for a new global conference where we will share again our experience and solution to manage infodemic better. Tim.
Thank you. Before you adjourn, just one housekeeping announcement. All the materials will be soon available on the WHO website for you to see. Also, the recording of this conference. And the second thing is, as we will be concluding in a minute, we will also playing the video of the first cohort of infodemic managers that completed the WHO training course. And if you feel inspired, look out for the second cohort announcement for next year, when we will train the next cohort of infodemic managers.
And my last word is really, I want to thank the fabulous team here at WHO who has put together this conference. The track leads in particular, I know it has been very demanding on them to organize those webinars. Thank also my regional colleagues and my other colleagues from the UN for their incredible support in this journey. So thanks to all. Bye.
biggest infodemic management issue in Mali is COVID-19 disease denial.
Overload and harmful messages on COVID-19, both online and offline, are making it hard for Nigerians to follow health expert advice related to the pandemic.
One of the biggest issues for infodemic management here in Kyrgyzstan right now is that people, including medical workers, seem very unwilling to get a potential COVID vaccine because they are afraid that they will get sick with COVID if they get it.
The biggest infodemic management issue in Serbia currently is effectively promoting the healthy behavior of wearing a mask in closed spaces and keeping a distance, and intelligently discussing the benefits of a safe and effective vaccine.
मेरा नाम उमर है और मेरा ताल्लुक पाकिस्तान से है. Infodemics remained an issue in this country due to the belief of general population that herbal remedies are more effective in prevention of COVID, and this belief actually brought a change in the behavior. So instead of having face masks and social distancing, they started believing protected by using these herbal remedies.
The belief that COVID-19 is just a simple flu has become popular in our country. Many say, look, people just recover, so let's just self-medicate.
Social inoculation, debunking, fact-checking, and social network analysis are some of the key insights we have tackled during the Infodemic Manager training. Actions speak louder than words.
I'm trying to use my knowledge and skills as an infodemic manager to debunk that misinformation on my social media and several social media platforms. Also, I'm using the risk communication and engagement team in my office to make sure this misinformation is being tackled.
And the key insights gained from the course for me will include being where the people are and winning over the undecided. I think these are the things that I'll put in my toolbox as my smart strategies as an infodemic manager.
I'll be using my IM skills to further my research into misinformation and how it influences health information seeking behavior. And I'll be designing interventions that guide people to accurate and reliable health information.
With the government starting this month the national vaccination campaign, we are facing a huge level of mistrust and misinformation from the population, and I hope to engage in community engagement and behavioral change as well as social marketing to help the government optimize people's behavior and encourage them to engage in vaccination.
The key insight I got from this training was the opportunity to build strong relationships with colleagues in other countries who are dealing with similar circumstances.
Saya Jumatil Fajar, manajer Infodemic dari Indonesia.
Hello， 大家好，我是来自北京大学的黄杰。
Ndị banye kene mụnụ, aha m bụ Dọkịta Chiduka Ọhazụike, nwafọ Igbo n'ala Nigeria, abụ m Infodemic Manager.
Ago Nkwanyenye Erasmus Bidimajo, Ghana.
मैं हूँ रश्मि पोपी, इंडिया से, और मैं हूँ एक Infodemic Manager.
Dobar dan, ja sam Stefan iz Srbije i ja sam menadžer Infodemije.
أنا دكتورة نجوى خميس من القاهرة من مصر، بعمل في إدارة المعلومات المضللة Infodemic Manager.
Hello everyone, my name is Sarwakas from Morocco and I am a young Infodemic Manager.
안녕하세요. 저는 한국질병관리청의 김윤아이고 현재 미국 CDC에서 근무 중인 Infodemic Manager입니다.
Selamat sizlerle. Ben Laura Evans, men Kyrgyzstan'da yaşayım, gene isteyim.
Ako si Dr. Iris Tiel Isiptan, isang Infodemic Manager.
Hi, I'm Anna Khan from US CDC in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm an Infodemic Manager.
Sunana Kabir Isa Ado daga Nigeria, kuma ni Infodemic Manager ne.
Soy Diego Espíndola de Medellín, Colombia, y soy un gestor de la infodemia.
Ngayong adlaw, ako si Kay Bukal, gikan sa Cebu, Philippines. Isa ko ka-Infodemic Manager.
Hi, my name is Lynette and I'm from Australia and proud to be an Infodemic Manager. The key insight from the WHO Infodemic Management training that has stuck with me is that Infodemic Management is a process, not an end state, like community engagement, building trust, learning a new language, staying healthy and fit, and of course being in love. You've got to be in it for the long haul.
There's comfort in knowing that we're not alone and together we're stronger.